To start this presentation on the importance of the SharePoint community. I'm doing this for the brand new SharePoint community for Southern Maryland. Very first user group meeting. Yeah. My name is Nakia Carter. I am the Director of Collaboration and Training for C3 Integrated Solutions. I'm a Microsoft strategist, solutions developer, and trainer, and I have specialties in Office 365, SharePoint, and related tech. And then you can see some of my street cred here, which you may think, okay, that's a whole lot of extraneous information when we're about to talk about the SharePoint community. But it's all relevant, and you'll see why in a little bit. So first thing we need to do is we need to look at the evolution of SharePoint. SharePoint has been through a whole bunch of different evolutions, and the evolutions are still happening. So we have way back when SharePoint wasn't even really SharePoint. It was a file server, basically, SharePoint 2001. And then they added in like team services, and then it started growing to 2003 and then 2007 and then 2010 when it actually really, I think, was the better, when I started really liking it. I mean, I loved SharePoint in 2007 at first, but then I got to 2010. I was like, this looks so much cleaner. But of course, there was a lot of changes from 2007 to 2010. There was a lot of changes from 2003 to 2007, 2001 to 2003. And that is continuing, the trend is continuing as we move into 2013, 2016, and VNext, which is 2019, which is out in preview. And that's not to mention even all of the iterations of some of the tools that were used for SharePoint as well, like front page. Anybody remember that? Oh, yeah, that's how I learned to do my first HTML. My first web page was in front page. I can't even remember which version it was. I think it was 2007. But that is throwback, way back, just throwing it.
I don't even want to see my sure.
Yeah, I was doing it up then. I thought I was doing a little something. But now I look back like, ooh.
Clean up the code because it added so many.
Oh yeah, there was a whole bunch of extraneous stuff that and then remember the GIF running man and all that stuff. We was doing some stuff back then, boy. But then, you know, front page was also you also were able to use that with SharePoint back in the day until Designer came out in 2007. And then of course you had InfoPath, and I still love InfoPath, but there's more versions of it up to 2010 InfoPath and Designer 2010 and 2013 Designer and InfoPath 2013, which is the last versions of both of those, since we have Microsoft Flow and Power Apps coming to the stage and taking the place. And then if we look at like some of the server side tools, you have those things as well, which also have gone through a bunch of iterations.
NPM.
Yeah. That's going back. Some of the stuff I haven't even done. I've done IIS Express and .NET, Microsoft .NET and C# and Visual Studio up until I think 2012 version. But other than that, I've been pretty much more on the client side instead of the server side. Doing more JavaScript and jQuery. I've touched a little bit of TypeScript, but not real seriously. But you can see there's a bunch of different versions of all of that technology. And then add on top of that, Azure, Office 365. So more and more technology coming out, and the momentum for Office 365 is not slowing down. It's growing, it's getting faster. There's more than 30,000 organizations using Office 365, including 85% of Fortune 500. And this slide isn't even talking about government and how government is getting in there, but they're also, that's speeding up. We were talking about that earlier, FAA, IRS, I think NSF, also DLA. Yeah. DHS. Yep, there's a bunch of different agencies
that's-
already moving, in the process of moving. So adding to this number. But then there's also Microsoft's government cloud. So the GCC High, GCC Classified, which is going to be coming out, I think, later next year or earlier next year. I can't remember what quarter it's going to be in. But there is explosion in growth in OneDrive for Business. Microsoft is a recognized leader for 6 of Gartner's Magic Quadrants and for Forrester Waves. Teams is like exploding like crazy now. Office 365 Groups was another thing. Even though Teams is starting to overtake that, we'll see how long Groups last. I think Groups is going to end up becoming the permission model. And Teams is going to be what Groups was.
I like the community sites and what they did with that and how they laid that out in the tiles and stuff like that.
Yep. And the community sites, I think, are going to get killed now, probably pretty soon. I think they're on their way down. And yes, I did say killed, because that's what I meant. So Microsoft doesn't just kill things; they killed it. They kill the crap out of it. They don't mess around. So you still may be asking yourself why. Just even though I just pointed out all of the different changes that are happening in the SharePoint community, that are happening in tech in general, why would it be important for me to be part of the community? Why should I care? So in order for me to kind of illustrate that a bit further, besides just going through the history of SharePoint and the tech surrounding SharePoint, I want to talk to you about my perspective, and hopefully that will help you answer from your perspective some of the reasons why you should get involved into the community, and make sure you stay in the community, because there's a lot for you in that. So there's some humble beginnings for me. If you see, that's me right there with the arrow over top of my head. I was so cute back then. And 4 of my siblings, I have 4 siblings. And 2 of my girl cousins, which were my favorite cousins. That's my older brother, but I'm the oldest of 4. That's my baby sister and my baby brother. And then these are my 2 cousins and their sisters, half sisters, but my favorite cousins. But I grew up in Baltimore. Baltimore is not the easiest place to grow up, especially not in the inner city. I grew up west side, so I grew up on perhaps a better part of the inner city, but it's still a bunch of trials and tribulations that go down. Actually, this intersection is close to where the riots happened, and this is my hood. This is where I came from. My mom still lives down the road. We still go there. Been there like last weekend. But I grew up in poverty. I actually grew up in one of those households where your parents, one of them's probably working, the other one not so much, taking care of the family, was working, then she stopped. My parents divorced. I think I was around 8 or 9 when that happened. So being the older child, I had to step up and start helping with the family and everything. But my dad stayed in my life, which was cool. And one of the things my dad was big into, and my dad's side of the family especially, was education. Education and VNex. Even if they didn't know how to deal with VNex, they were like, you were going to figure out how to deal with VNex. So my dad and my grandma got together and got me and my siblings this Tandy Color Computer 3. If you remember Radio Shack. Yeah, I'm throwing it back. Because Radio Shack ain't around no more. That thing gone. But what came with that Tandy Color Computer 3 that had cartridges. Remember cartridges that, like when you played the Nintendo, you had to blow them, push them in there. So it came with cartridges. Yeah, try to bang on it a little bit, make sure it was fully contacted in the inside. It came with this. It came with a BASIC book. BASIC is a programming languages that a lot of young kids back in the day, now they don't use that as much. Now they use other things like Scratch and other ways to learn programming languages. But I learned BASIC out of this book. It came with the book. I sat there and read it, and I actually went through all the exercises, and I taught myself BASIC out of that book. So that was kind of happenstance, but it taught me that I actually was good at coding. I actually could do it. People in my environment, a lot of people don't get that chance. So they probably are walking around with the ability to do that, but they don't know. It kind of got built upon when I moved into high school, and I went to Baltimore Polytechnic Institute, which is the top high school in Baltimore City, citywide, or some people call it a magnet school. We call it a citywide school. It's a engineering and science school. Although I graduated with honors, and I graduated as the
masonry.
Yep. So well, no, not masonry, not masonry. So on the engineering side, we did carpentry, woodwork, blueprinting, and metalworking. So I did welding. I was actually really good at it. So me and this guy, we were in competition. He got the highest grades in engineering. I got the highest grades in science, but he was number 2 for science, and I was number 2 for engineering. So we were like always feeding off each other. But from that, I had one class in computer science at that school, and it was basic. It was extended basic class, which I whizzed through. I was actually just sitting there doing other people's work, trying to help them along, and where they couldn't do it, I was just like, let me just do this for you so you don't fail out of this one class. So then I went on to Howard first, but I finished up my degree at Towson. At Howard, I went through, and I started off in aerospace engineering because I was interested in aerospace. And then I was like, what am I doing? Let me go back to computer science like I know I'm supposed to be doing. So I only stayed at Howard for the first year, and I went to Towson, and I graduated with a bachelor's in computer science. 2 years later, I had gotten another job in Baltimore, but that didn't pan out. What really panned out was when I moved to King George. So this is kind of showing a picture of coming over the bridge into King George County. Mm-hmm. And you know exactly what that looked like. He like, I know what that looked like right there. Mm-hmm. And you probably don't know where King George is until you realize you've driven through it probably a billion times going to King's Dominion, more than likely. Most people have driven through King George, did not know what the heck it was. I know I had, and I did not know what it was until I actually moved there. But the thing that gave me the big break, in February of 2001, I moved there for a job at CSC. I actually did coding for the Navy using CMS2, which is a really old programming language based on assembly. It's horrible. Don't do it if you can avoid it. Unless you like assembly, because it's horrible. But I don't like assembly. And then I also learned Ada there, and Java, and furthered my skills in C and C++ while I was waiting for my clearance. But then 9/11 happened. Everything went classified. Clearance process slowed down for contractors. I got laid off. I ended up a few months later working at NSWC as a federal employee. I was there for 1 month shy of 5 years, and that was because I had to get out of there. Those people are crazy. But anyway, through that experience, I worked in a bunch of different places. I had to, when you're a new federal employee, at least there, you have to go through these things called a rotation. So you rotate to different agencies inside of that agency. So different organizations in there. Each one, you get a specific project to do specific things. Every time I went to a different rotation, you have to do 4 of them. I had to learn something new. So my first one I had to do in my home, I had to do a program in C# built on an access database of frequencies, and export the data out in a report to Word. So that was my first assignment. Second assignment, I had to work for the facilities management place. So I was the only programmer in this first place. The other person was a database person, and other than that, it was all contractors, and we weren't really allowed to talk to the contractors as much. So I had to learn a lot of stuff by myself. One thing happened where another programmer came in on a rotation. He taught me Visual Studio because the language wasn't a problem. Visual Studio using the tool was a problem. Anybody remember Borland? Borland C? That's what I used to use. And I got into Visual Studio and I was like, what am I supposed to do with this thing? So he gave me a real quick tutorial and I was able to finish my project there. Then I moved on to facilities. I had to do a project in VB6 on a SQL Server database and an Ellipse database, which is kind of like SQL Server. And then I had to export the data out in a report every night. It had to run auto every night, exporting the report out to Word. Then I had to do, for my third one, I had to do a go into intranet development, and I did some development in ASP Classic, VB Script, making a bunch of forms that were on the intranet for people to use. Then my last one, I had to develop Java and Java Beans, collecting packets from the intranet and putting a report out for their intranet about the usage of their intranet. So every time I moved, I had to learn a different thing. Most of the time, I was the only developer. One time, there was another developer that was there. That was my manager. She was never there. So that VB thing, I had to figure it all out on my own. They said up until a few years ago, because I see her every few years, at least until recently, she was like, we still use it. I was like, dang, you still use that? Sucker's old. But I had to figure all that stuff out. You know, I only met with her twice. I had to figure it all out pretty much by myself, except for the 2 times that I met with her. I had to make a lot of assumptions. The only one where I had an actual team kind of was the last one, where I had 2 other developers that would actually talk to me. My third one, it was a bunch of booze people, and they would not talk to me for some reason. They could not stand my guts. I don't know why, because I'm a likable person, but they could not stand me. So I could not get any help from them at all.
They got paid once a month.
Yeah, I don't know. They might have been mad at it. They might have been mad at that. Like, you get paid twice a month? Man, forget you, woman. So I don't know why, but I had to get out of there. And I ended up working at CACI. This was the end of my developer days in just applications, intranet development. I worked there as a systems programmer. That's where I did Perl, I did XML, XSLT, JavaScript, VB Script. I worked in, I forget what that thing was called. It was this really old program that I had to keep on updating to get different reports out of. I can't even remember what I used for that. So I had to learn a bunch of different stuff again. I also had to learn how to use Doors, and then use Doors programming language, which I forget what it's called, but it's like C. So I had to develop different reports using that programming language for Doors to pull out requirements and stuff like that. So my whole experience was basically just me as a developer, or getting closer to the end, one of a team. Some of them would talk to me, some of them would. And then when I got to CACI, I had a team. That was my first actual team where people, and I loved CACI. But they would talk to me. We loved each other. There was a great dynamic between us. But working for the naval environment can be kind of tricky at times. In the Navy, it's based on subs and ships and things like that. And whenever a project goes down, your contract could be up. So I jumped ship from CACI because I heard that it was coming. They actually warned us. So I was like, time to start looking. And I interviewed for a company called Second Corps. Now, Second Corps was the first one to tell me, hey, we got SharePoint. We think you can do SharePoint. And I'm like, sure. Looks like ASP.NET. I could just do a whole bunch of ASP.NET programming. Boy. Later, I was like, whoa, I was trying to code everything. That wasn't going to work out too hot. But during this time, when I was interviewing for Second Corps was in Quantico. I was pregnant. Found out I was pregnant before I took the job. So I didn't end up taking a job. I went to interview also for SDC, which is in Dahlgren. You know SDC, right? Which is in Dahlgren. I chose their job. But the point about this part is once I got into SharePoint and I was doing SharePoint 2007, I took a huge pay jump. My husband was getting paid $33,000 a year. I was at 65, I think. I went up $25,000 like that, just switching technologies. So I was like, okay, which was good because that's when the housing bust happened and a bunch of people lost their job. My husband was one of them. So him losing his job, he was able to stay home with the kids, which he's still now. So we kind of made a shift. Of course, I'm getting paid more than I was getting paid then, but still, that was a huge jump just for that. I ended up going to Booz Allen Hamilton because 6 months into me working at SDC, the stupid ship died. The ship that I jumped from died. Then I jumped to another one, which was the DDX 1000 program. That died, or it got put on indefinite hold or something like that. So I ended up getting laid off anyway, which sucked. Then I had to wait a few months because I was pregnant, but I was still interviewing. After I finished with that, I went to work at Booz Allen Hamilton. That's where I started to learn the power of networking and community. Because Booz Allen is a company of consultants. They value networking and community, knowledge sharing and such. So I learned that from there. I learned that I should probably join a user group. My first user group was SharePoint User Group of DC. No, actually, my first user group was FedSpug and Women in SharePoint. Then I joined SharePoint User Group of DC. And then I started to really realize, like in Booz Allen, since there was only but so many SharePoint developers, I was one of a very few that knew how to do SharePoint. So I was able to, through the networking, once I learned the game, I would put my resume out and get a job within a week in Booz Allen. So as soon as I knew my contract was up, I put out my resume, get a choice of like 5 or 6 jobs, and then I choose the one I wanted. Sometimes didn't work out to be the best project, but most of the time I always made sure that I was working at home because the commute for me from King George to McLean was about 6 to 8 hours a day, round trip. Yeah, that was a whole nother work day, every day, 16 hours. But I was doing my master's degree at that time. I got a master's degree in IT project management, so working in the van actually worked out for me, even though I was tired as crap. And then my husband raised my son. I got to raise my 2 girls. My husband raised my son because I was hardly ever there. I was there to eat and sleep. That was it. So I got to do 2007 SharePoint, and then I moved on to doing some 2010, depending on the contract that I was in. And working through the network in Booz Allen, I learned a lot, but also working through the networks and the communities in the SharePoint communities, through those two, I learned a lot. Then I got the bright idea, hey, why don't I start my own company? Booz is getting paid double what they're paying me. And they're chinchy with their rates as far as the getting a pay bump every year. So I was like, hey, I could go do this. I learned how to network in Booz. The wide world shouldn't be that much harder, right? Except for it's bigger. It's way, way bigger. But I was able to run my company for 6 years before I sold off to C3, and I'm there now. So this is just showing a few iterations of some of the pictures that I had up until this last one. This is my most recent professional LinkedIn picture. So I was able to run the company doing SharePoint and Office 365 work for 6 years.
Right,
and I did.
President in that picture, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. So I did.
That's partner look right there.
Yeah, that's that partner look. Partner. Yeah, my company was a Microsoft partner, a silver level partner. And I did a bunch of SharePoint 2007 and 2010 as well, depending on the client, because there's still that out there. Cringe although nobody wants to deal with it, but somebody got to deal with it. Through all of my networking and community experience in the Microsoft community, but also through the SharePoint community, I was able to do all of these things. I started running the SharePoint user group of DC. I joined Microsoft's Voices for Innovation. I'm kind of like in my, they call it emeritus status, where you kind of take a year off, even though they don't kind of give you the year, kind of, but you're not responsible for so much stuff. Or going to the board meetings and stuff. I was on another Microsoft board where I had to go to Seattle once a year for each of those boards. And then I also had to go to site visits for the other board that I was on. I've written articles for Microsoft. I was in Microsoft's Partner Pivot as a featured partner. I've had lots of articles written about me as a small micro partner for Microsoft. I've written a lot of different articles, blogs. I've written one book so far and co-authored, and I've done 2 video courses for PACT. I wrote an article for the Virginia Pilot. I've done a multitude of different videos. If you ever look, me up online, if you use Nakia T. Carter, like a lot of stuff pops up for me because I use that T to make sure I'm differentiated from the other Nakia Carters, which there aren't that many. There's only like 51 in the whole U.S. or something like that. But just to set me all apart. But the point is, and for Voices for Innovation, I also got a chance to go to China. And this one right here is an actual interview where you can see me right there. But if you watch the video, you could see me a bunch of more times. But I was actually in China on a embassy mission between the U.S. and Microsoft U.S. and Microsoft China, with China's friendship coalition for friendship. Forget the whole name for it. But we were able to go learn about the Chinese, learn what they were trying to do, talk to them because their technology is starting to explode, where they are going through their industrial age and their technology age at the same time. So they're trying to do a lot of lessons learned that we learned in our industrial age, which was a long time ago, because they're polluting the crap out of their environment right now. So they're trying to slow that down. They're trying to learn about green energy. They have a lot of people doing startups. They're trying to learn how to work with the rest of the world and build a technology so that they don't steal from people, too. So they're also starting to bring that rate down of them doing stuff like that. But their people are still very much trying to learn about entrepreneurship, trying to learn how to do things right for running a tech business, trying to learn from the world's mistakes instead of just trying to make all the mistakes themselves. So again, community, they're trying to learn from the technology communities that are around them. So just from me saying all of that, you could see how community and networking can get you far. I mean, your path might not be the same path that I took. Your background might not be the same background that I have. But through community involvement, you can go a lot faster and get a lot further than you would on your own. You have to be a part of a community in order to share ideas, get opportunities that you might not necessarily have gotten. So you start off slow, but then you start gaining opportunities. Like first, some of these, you don't see me in some of these pictures, but some of these pictures I'm in here as a speaker, like for some of the very, very early stuff. Where now I do a lot of technology speaking, and I'm starting to get more opportunities there because my brand is up. That's another benefit of being part of a community. Not only do you get those opportunities, you get to know other people that you can share knowledge with. They share knowledge with you. And when opportunities come up, hey, I know somebody that could do that. Or, hey, would you like to do so-and-so? Because, we like you. Maybe, you might want to do this thing. So you will have to start off slowly, but you keep moving forward. From the community, you learn, then eventually you start teaching, then you collaborate, And then you exchange ideas, and the cycle just keeps going on and on and on. But while it's going on and on, you're spiraling up. You're not staying in the same spot. But it's going to be what you get out of it is what you put in. You have to put in the effort. You have to network. You have to come to the meetings. You have to be the person that's curious. You have to talk to people. You have to engage in the community, whatever community you choose. You don't have to choose every SharePoint community, because we have multiple in the DC, Virginia, Maryland area. We have this Southern Maryland users group. We have 4 or 3 of them in DC, Virginia, Northern Virginia. We have the one in Richmond. And there's ones for Office 365 popping up now. So whichever user group or community that you want to be involved in, be involved. There's also lots of different conferences to go to. SharePoint Saturday is the most popular one because it's free, they feed you, and you can go all over the US as long as somebody pays your way or you pay your own way. But the more you're in the public eye for the community, the more you'll become somebody that's trusted, that knows what they're talking about. You'll start getting opportunities to start speaking, so don't be shy. Take those opportunities, try to figure out what you want to speak on. The best place to speak, starting off, is at a user group meeting, because people are pretty gentle at user group meetings, especially if you tell them that you're new. Same thing at the SharePoint Saturday, and Office 365 Friday or Saturday through spsevents.org. You can start building your personal brand. So not only are you learning and you're collaborating and you have other people that you can reach out to in times of trouble, and they can reach out to you, and you start becoming a person that's personable and that people will want to reach out to. That's how you define your personal brand. People get to know you. They get to trust you. Once they trust you, your brand's out there. People start coming to you out of the blue. People that you don't even know. I've gotten a few contracts that way. People just found me on LinkedIn. They saw me at a conference. They were actually in the audience. Somebody else recommended me. So all of that ties together, and why you should be a part of the community. Also, you should keep moving forward. Don't be this guy, okay? You don't want to be the guy, as you can see right there, it says, you kids today with your cloud computers and your SharePoints. In my day, we used to attach files to our emails, and we liked it that way. And the other dude is like, dude, you are only like 2 years older than me. What are you talking about? You become this dude, then, you become a dinosaur. And we all know what happened to the dinosaurs, right? Rip. Rip to the dinosaurs, because if you don't keep moving forward, you get killed. That's what happens. If you don't continue to evolve, you die off. And that dying off means no more job opportunities for you. Or you get pigeonholed into something that you might not like doing anymore. Or you can't move up in stature. You can't move up in pay because you're in this pigeonhole. You got to keep it moving. Okay? Always keep it moving. Don't forget, or you get killed. Now I want to give a big shout out to Fabian, because Fabian Williams, one of my friends in the SharePoint community, MVP, which hopefully I will be at some point. They just put a hiatus on the MVP. So I was just like, dude, right there. He was like, your profile is awesome, but what? Yeah, we're going to have to hold on you. I'm like, oh. But anyway, Fabian, MVP, awesome SharePoint guy, knows a lot about SharePoint, has done a lot of stuff. He actually works for Digitum now. I think he's a principal, but he helped me out greatly because he gave me his deck that he presented to the SharePoint Saturday Virginia Beach. And I used a lot of his material, but then I added in my own and hid some of his slides. But if it wasn't for Fabian, I would have had to create this whole thing from scratch. So again,
I saw that roadmap. I was like, oh,
yeah, that looks familiar, right? Yeah, that's another thing. Community, networking saves you. They if the people know you, they like you, they would just give you. Here's my presentation. I've given my presentation to a multitude of people. Right. They're like, I just need bits out of. Shoot, here you go.
That's that blessing.
Do what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. that part of the community. Pay it forward, it will get paid back to you. So if anybody would like to get in touch with me or my company, there is some of our social handles. I try to keep aware of all the messaging that we get in sometimes, but I am running our Twitter for mine and my company, our Facebook. I'm not running the Google, but I am running the LinkedIn as well. And then hopefully we'll start using our Office 365, C3 Office 365 YouTube channel again at some point. So if you have any questions, need to reach out, need some moral support, because I have even talked to people about how I started my company. I've given presentations about that. If you're interested in entrepreneurship, reach out to me. Holla at your girl. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yes, I needed that.